Okay, hey. Hi everybody. Thanks for joining this WebEx here. My name is Nathan Huffman. I am the customer success rep for Canada. I'm the guy here in the support office here in St. Louis for Climate FieldView that does a lot of the training and just support for Canada. But if you're not from Canada, don't worry. I'll still answer your questions here today. But what we're going to be going over is basically how do we stream data from our CAD app using that FieldView drive or that hockey puck you might call it, or your 2020, and just the basics of how to get things connected and set up and ready for you to get that data mapping and streaming. So I think we have about as many people as we're going to get. So we'll go ahead and kick this thing off. If you have questions, go ahead and throw them into that little Q&A section, that little type-in section there in the bottom. I think it's bottom right, and we will answer them. We'll try to get answers to them if we can throughout the presentation, but really we're going to save it if we can to the end to try and get all those figured out. So that should do it. We'll go ahead and kick it off. So how do I use this drive thing? So the first thing we really like to pay attention to, and I think it's the most important part of this whole process, is are we even compatible to use that drive in that piece of machinery? Anytime we talk about installing a drive with an iPad and such, the first thing we need to be thinking about is compatibility, and that's a lot more in depth than most people really kind of realize. The things you need to check, things you need to know would be the year, make, model of both the implement and the tractor. So every piece of equipment that's involved in that, from the planter to the tractor, if it's a seeder setup, so your air cart, your seeder, your tractor, every piece of machinery involved there we need to know the year, make, and model of that. All of the monitors that are in cab, we need to know. So sometimes there's 2 or 3 monitors in there. They're all running different things, whether it's from a fertilizer to the seeding to the auto guidance and stuff. We need to know what monitors they are and then what they're controlling, what their job is. GPS receivers or globes or antennas or bubbles or whatever you want to call them, we need to know what those are as well. That changes from one model to the next. That can determine of how that signal comes across on CAN, and that's how our drive reads. So we need to know what those are to make sure those are compatible. And then last but not least, the actual rate controllers that are on the implement or the yield sensors on that combine, whatever that sensor or controller is that's actually sensing the product moving or controlling the product, we need to know what those are too. Just like the receiver, they'll give off a different signal, and we need to know which ones we're looking at so we can pick them up on that drive. Of course, with anything with compatibility and also with any other questions as we go throughout this presentation, if you have any questions, doubts, or anything like that, please contact our support line. That number there, that 888 number, that will get you to any one of us here in the office, including myself, possibly, and we would be glad to answer those questions for you. And of course, that link there that you see, that's the link to our compatibility guide for you to be able to check on your own if you would like. So actually connecting your drive, once you've addressed your compatibility and you determine if you need additional hardware, so cables or whatnot, or if you don't, which would all be explained in the compatibility guide. Once you know that, then we're ready to go ahead and start connecting that hardware. So additional hardware, most of the time that means cables, adapter cables. Some setups also have GPS converters if it's a serial GPS connection. So that's all we really talk about. When we talk about additional hardware, that's all that could be really provided there as far as getting you connected and mapping. Those adapter kits, what those are is, depending on your setup, depending on your monitors, depending on all that, after you go through compatibility, we need, for a drive to map, we need GPS and rate, all in one spot, all in a signal that we can read, and we need to plug that drive into that spot. So that harness it acts in lieu of the 9-pin diagnostics port, so that it can pull all that information we need to map all in one spot. If you don't need an adapter kit, such as in a lot of John Deere setups, then you'll be able to plug the drive right into that diagnostics port, where we can pull that GPS, that rate, all from that one spot. So again, if any questions, please let us know. Call our support line, or shoot us an email at support@climate.com, and we'd be glad to answer those questions. So adapter kits, if you do need one, it is extremely important to follow the installation guide. They're not they're not hard to follow. They're not daunting by any means, but they are very important still. There's going to be, if you have say you have an FMX in there, a Trimble monitor or something, a third-party monitor in there, a lot of times it's very, very important that we go into those monitors and set certain settings specifically for the drive to be able to pick up the information. So always follow the instructions. And then, of course, if you have questions, let us know. And this is some images of what it would kind of look like. So as you can see, they're one page, one step type things, not daunting at all. So once we're connected, we have our drive with our adapter cable connected in the machine. We've assessed that it's compatible. We're good to go. We actually need to start pairing that with our iPad. That drive needs to be connected to our iPad now, so it can stream that information. The drive is, I like to call it, it's kind of it's the vessel, it's the boat, if you will, of carrying the data over to your cab app. So it takes all those CAN messages and converts them into DAT files for that cab app to be able to read and make a map. In order for it to do that, it needs to be paired with iPad. So we do that with Bluetooth. The first thing you would do is have your drive plugged in, turn on the key of the machine. The first thing you'll see a green light on the drive, and that means that it's got power. What you should see right after that is that it immediately flashes blue rapidly. That means it's looking for your iPad. It's looking for a Bluetooth connection. In order to connect that Bluetooth, the first thing we'd be doing is be going to your iPad, to your settings icon. It looks like that little gray gearbox there. And then you'll go to your Bluetooth settings, which will be on the left-hand side, as you can see in this image here. And we'll just want to make sure first that it says on, which you can verify that once you go into the settings and you got a little green switch at the top. Make sure that's green. Once that's on, it should automatically start looking for devices. So that drive's out there looking, now your iPad's out there looking, and we just got to give it a second, and eventually it'll find each other. And then you'll see it pop up in your devices list down there. All you have to do is just go ahead and tap on it, and then it'll say connected. As you can see in this image, that's what you're looking for, is next to your device, just say connected after you've tapped on it. After that, after you have that indication, you are ready to go ahead and go into the cab app. We can go ahead and close out of your iPad settings and go into your cab app. Your cab app is going to be on your iPad home screen. It'll be that icon, it's that black F with the white square. That's what you're looking for. Just go ahead and tap on that, and that is how you open your cab app. Just to kind of sidetrack here, since we're already here, let's go ahead and talk about it. When you open your cab app, the first page you're going to see is what we call the home page. This is where all of your tabs are for your various parts of the app. So if you're ever at one part of the app and you need to go back to, say, another, always look for that little house, and it'll take you back to the home page. Just a little side note also, this is when we talk about Cloud Sync, or you ever hear anybody talk about Cloud Sync, that's down in the bottom left-hand corner of your home page. There'll be that little arrow with it that spins in a circle. That's that Cloud Sync button. So when it's spinning, that means you're streaming data. But we'll go ahead and move on past that. We want to get it connected, the drive connected to your cab app now. So, like we did earlier, we went into our iPad settings, we connected the Bluetooth there, but now we need to tell the cab app that you're connected to the drive. You need to know what it's connected to, right? So from the home page on your cab app, you go to that settings icon, looks like this, like that little box there. It'll say settings. And in that settings, you'll see a devices tab on the left-hand side. You'll want to make sure that's selected. When that's selected, you'll see your drives listed over there on the right-hand side. If you have multiple, you'll see multiple there. If you only have the one, you'll only see the one. If we've already connected Bluetooth on the iPad settings, you should see an indication that says tap to connect. All you do, again, just like you did in the previous step, is you just tap on it, and then you should see one indication would be the green check mark. The next indication would be if you look at your drive, it should be a solid blue now. It's not blinking anymore. That should mean that you're connected and that part of this process is done. One side note to keep in mind, if you're having issues connecting, one thing we see a lot is if you have multiple iPads and you have multiple drives, make sure you keep those one iPad to one drive. Keep them organized. If you're switching iPad to drive because from one machine to the next, from one day to the next, it can give you connectivity issues. So just try to keep them color-coded with a sticker saying this iPad goes with that drive or whatever works for you. Just make sure you keep them organized so you avoid those connectivity issues. So now we're connected with a drive. The next thing, in order for us to be able to start mapping and then streaming our data, is we have to tell the CAB app what the machine is that we're actually connected to. Without us telling it, it doesn't know. It just sees canned messages, and those messages come in the form of zeros and ones and stuff like that. It doesn't know that this is a case, whatever machine that we're talking about there, right? So we have to tell it. The way we do that is we build equipment in the CAB app. So what you do is, going back to that home page like we discussed earlier, that little house, you'll see in the middle of your home page there is a button that says equipment. It'll look like a little tractor there, and it'll say equipment. Select that, and we will step through the process of how to build the equipment. Now, one thing to keep in mind, you're going to have to build every piece of equipment, so including the tractor and the planter, right? So if you have that, when we talked about earlier, we talk about compatibility, we talk about air seeder, air cart, tractor. If you have all that, you have to make sure those are all built. So you'll need to do both, right? So building equipment. It's very important to be as accurate as possible. If you have any questions as you go through building each one of these pieces of equipment and you're not sure of what's the spacing, how many rows do I have, what controller or yield sensor do I have, those types of things, like what's the frame style of my planter, make sure we know those types of things, because that can affect the way that the map builds. And we want quality in all of these types of maps, right? So I think, so one thing to keep in mind there as well, for some reason CAB app does everything in inches instead of feet. So if you see measurements, make sure you're paying attention. They are likely in inches, not feet. So you'll have to make sure you take care of you keep that in mind. And again, like we said earlier, the rate control system and monitor are very important from a compatibility side of things, and then from an equipment build side of things. We have to tell CAB app what that display is and then what that controller is, so we know what we're looking for. So once we have equipment built, we now have, we told CAB app what to expect when we're mapping, but we have to go ahead and make sure it's active, right? The way we do that is on that same equipment tab, after we've built the equipment, you should see green check mark to the top if you have that piece of machinery active. In this situation, as you can see in the picture there, I have a tractor and a seeder active, which is what you would hope to see. If you only see a seeder and you don't have a tractor, make sure you have a tractor. If you see the other way around, make sure you've got both pieces of machinery there as set as active with a green check mark. If it doesn't have a green check mark, and if you want to set it as active, as you can see down here on that picture, you'll have all your machinery, all the machines you've built. You can just touch that set active, and that should then move it to the top with a green check mark. And once you have all your equipment with the green check mark, you're ready to go back to the home page, and then we'll go to the map screen, that map icon there. The map page is where we're actually going to map. We're ready, we're in the field, we're getting ready to start going, and we want to start mapping, right? This is where you'll do that. The first couple things you'll want to make sure, though, so when the map page opens, you'll want to make sure you have an active field selected. That can be done by a couple different ways. One, you can just touch in that top left drop-down menu, and you can select the appropriate field to activate. But what should really be happening is it should automatically be sensing when you're in a field anyway and prompting you. So prompting you by putting a little pop-up window on your screen asking you if you want to set the field active. It should be detecting that you're in the correct field. So the way we make sure that that's done is you go to your boundary detection settings in your map options and just make sure it says prompt. Make sure prompt is white. If it's auto or disabled, some people like to use those settings, but I'll say my strong recommendation is to keep it at prompt. It'll give you the best user experience, I think, and it'll give you less problems later on down the road. So if you have your boundary detection set to prompt, that should work best for you. And then also you wouldn't have to go into that drop down every time and select the active field. It'll prompt you to do such. So once we have the active field set and we have active equipment, your map screen should look something like this. You should have these boxes off to the left-hand side, and then you should be getting maybe some prompts there in the middle of the screen to select your hybrids or whatnot. So touching on that hybrid window will pop up this hybrid selection window here. If you don't have anything selected yet, you just tap to select your hybrids on that big white button there, and you'll have a list. You'll have a drop-down list of what you can search for whatever hybrid or variety you're planting. If you don't have that in the list, you can type it out and you can do it as a custom in there as well. Same for applications. You'll do that. You'll touch on it. It'll give you a similar window. You'll make sure you select the appropriate application. For both the hybrids and the applications here, it'll ask you for rows. So make sure once you're selecting the variety or application, make sure you're also selecting the appropriate rows for that planter to apply at, right? Okay, so now that was planting. This is, if we're talking about harvest, which makes a little more sense with the time of year it is. It'll look a little bit different when you're connected to a combine. You'll have some different metrics, green boxes on the left-hand side. Obviously, we're not talking about planting stuff now. We're talking about loads and total weight and moisture and stuff, right? You'll see that on the left-hand side, but also at the bottom, you'll have an indication of what rows on your head are active by these little green and red boxes. And also, you'll have your harvest height, your load number, and then your harvesting crop and variety listed at the bottom. It's very important to remember. So for planting, you tell it what crop you're planting, right? You tell it what variety you're planting. For harvest, we tell it the crop, but we do not tell it the variety. That variety is selected. It will show up in this list down here based off of whatever you planted in that location earlier that year. So having planting maps in your account are very important for harvest season, so that it knows what it's harvesting as you drive through it. So it'll take that GPS location of whatever planting map you had before and assimilate that to where you're at with that combine right now, what row, and that's how it knows what variety is harvesting, is what is in the head at that moment. We can't really do much to manually input that during harvest. It's all based off of whatever planting layer we have in there at the time. So keep that in mind. So here's some common, I thought it would be a good idea to throw in some common trip-ups that we see throughout the year, just so that if you see anything like this and you're experiencing issues, you can maybe quickly do some troubleshooting and fix it for yourself on the fly. If you're ever trying to map and and you're in the field and you have your map page pulled up and you do not see those green boxes we saw earlier on the left-hand side, it's very likely that you've lost connectivity to your drive. You'll just need to go back to those steps we showed earlier about connecting your drive and just verify that you have all the indications there that you're connected. So what that would mean is, do you, in your devices tab on settings of Cab app, do you have that green check mark or do you not? That kind of stuff, right? So no boxes means no drive connectivity more times than not. If you see gaps, as you see here, that shouldn't be there. So if you know there should be a gap because there's a wet spot, right? But if there's an unexpected gap, that's likely going to be due to that equipment that we built earlier. It's either that we built it wrong, we just had a measurement wrong, or it could be sometimes it just happens that there's some little bugs or something in that one equipment build. Just go ahead and delete that piece of equipment and then rebuild it. Oftentimes that fixes it. So, but when you do rebuild it, just make sure you pay special attention to your measurements, numbers, rows, sections, and so on. Oh, so we talked about all the drive, but what if I don't have a drive? What if I have this 2020? The 2020 makes things a lot more simple, I think. There is additional hardware for some setups. That'll be that FieldView module, we call it. So if you have a Gen 1 or a Gen 3 2020, there are modules specific to those setups that you'll need to have. If you have a Gen 1 or a Gen 3 2020, make sure you contact your precision dealer and ask them for the FieldView module. They provide those. We do not. You can use that link there to go to their site to visit to look for additional hardware. They also, I think they're on YouTube, or sorry, not YouTube, but on like eBay and such. But I would really shy away from doing that. Just try to get a hold of your precision dealer and see about getting these FieldView modules. They are required. Gen 2, you do not need it; it's built in. But the Gen 1 and Gen 3, you will. So that FieldView module, that extra hardware we're talking about, that's what does the data translation in this situation, so Cab app can read it. That's why it's important. Again, here's that phone number if you need to contact support or contact Precision to order, or if you have a Precision dealer you work with, you can talk to them. In order to connect your Cab app to your 2020, it's as simple as having that charging cable, that iPad Lightning cable. You plug it directly into the 2020 if you have a Gen 2, or you plug it directly into that FieldView module if you have a Gen 1 or Gen 3. They will all have a little USB port. You'll just connect that iPad cable into there, and that's it. It's a physical connection versus a Bluetooth connection in this situation. So, to connect a 2020, after you've physically connected it, you'll, just like you did with your drive, you'll go into your settings on Cab app, right, and go to devices, and much like you saw before with the drive, this time you'll see a prompt that asks you, is this your 2020? You'll say yes, and then you'll see your 2020 pop up just like you had a drive with a green check mark. That's how you know that it's connected to Cab app. To know if it's connected on the 2020 side, to verify connection, you'll go to your setup page, then the diagnose tab, and then where you see FieldView module, or FVM, and the iPad box, make sure those are green. That'll tell you that you're connected to the FieldView module and the iPad. If you have a Gen 3, it's a little bit different. It's the same Windows, but it's a little extra step, a couple extra steps in there. First, you'll go into that setup page, then the diagnose tab. But there'll be an additional button. It's called FVM. It'll be on the top right. Go to there, and once you click in there, you'll see a window in the, I think it's about the middle left top quarter of the screen. It'll say FieldView session and make sure it's active. That's how you know you're connected with the Gen 3. Mapping with your 2020. So like we did before with the drive, we had to have equipment built, right, so that we know Cab app knows what you're connected. In this situation, you do not have to build equipment in Cab app. Whatever settings you have set up in your 2020, so your planter setup that you have in there is going to sync over to your Cab apps. So that's automatically coming over, no need to build that in Cab app. The same would be for the active field and crop/hybrid selection. Whatever you have selected as your active field on 2020 and your active hybrid and crop, that'll flow over. No need to do it on the CAB app. So that pretty much concludes that. You can send us emails directly from that CAB app on that help screen as well, or you can call our number. So I hope this worked out for you guys. Hopefully talk to you guys in the future. Thanks.